Hello and welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark, CEO of Leadership, serial entrepreneur organization member, and I have spoke all over the world, 17 countries, talking about how winners find a way, talking about leading winning teams, my new book with Wiley Publishing. And of course, most people know me because I spent over 13 years in professional baseball coaching and 3 World Series. And today on the Winners Find a Way show, I am welcoming another fabulous athlete, Kelsey O'Connor. KOC, what's going on?
It's awesome to be here. That was a sweet reel coming in. I'm excited to be on the podcast. Thanks for having
I
me.
know. I feel like, like we could have brought you up at the commencement at NC State a little higher. I felt like, the chancellor's kind of like, hey, we got a student. And I'm like, this is KOC, man. You need to bring out some red carpet and lay it down because she's coming to bring the noise. That was a fabulous commencement speech you gave at NC State. Huge viral episode in your life. And,
Thank you.
KOC, that was what, 2, 3 years ago now?
2023. So
Yeah,
about a
okay.
little over a year ago.
A little over a year ago. All right. And so you were graduating NC State. So we love that, right?
Go
Love
Pack.
the old you're in Raleigh now, and that's
Yes.
pretty cool. But you're a Chicago girl. Grown up Naperville, Illinois. I appreciate that. I spent over 13 years in the Chicago area, just south of you, down in Frankfurt and New Lenox area. And now, originally, you're coming out of Chicago thinking, hey, you're a good athlete, you're getting opportunities, maybe stay closer to home. Loyola, right there. Obviously, Loyola's become a very more prominent school because the basketball programs had some
Basketball.
significant success in the dance and had a couple of good runs there, and they got a good program. But it's a fabulous school right in the city. I'm not sure about the softball program, but you pivot and step out of that and head to NC State. What was the change for that, Kelsey?
Yeah. So softball was a really early recruiting sport at the time. There weren't regulations around when you could talk to coaches. So that junior year rule didn't apply. So a lot of girls around me in the Midwest growing up were committing to schools as early as 7th and 8th grade. I'd kind of decided that at 14, I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to stay close to home. Loyola Chicago was just a great school. They were recruiting me for a while. I had a good relationship with the coach. And so I decided that was it. And I committed to play at Loyola. And then probably around my junior year was just when I started to rethink what I wanted to study, where I wanted to be. I had some injuries throughout high school. And so kind of some of the coaches and people around me and my parents were like, where would you be happy with or without softball? Like, make sure you're picking a school for the school. And I'm even at 15 and 16, I'm someone that journaled every day. I was, very reflective. And so I really was just kind of figuring out that I didn't want to be in Chicago anymore. I wanted to study something else. I kind of shifted gears towards social work. And so everything that I wanted for my future was kind of changing. And Loyola just didn't really fit that anymore. So it was a really amicable decommitment. The coach was amazing. They told me I was family. They were willing to help me find a new school. I mean, it was a really, kind separation. But then I was headed into my senior year of high school uncommitted, and I still had a goal. I wanted to play at a high level. So it was kind of a leap of faith to decide not to stay with Loyola and decide to go somewhere else. And so I was
Uh, and and
yeah.
as you described that, got to be a little serendipity because I owned a gym in Chicago, and a lot of the
Okay.
athletes out of Frankfurt were signing. It's all the schools down there are pretty sizable in sports as you think about some of the programs down there, pretty big. And of course, East High School was one of the biggies, right?
Yes.
And so a lot of kids coming out of there, and we had another girl sign at Auburn in the SEC, and I was shocked. I was shocked at how much noise she was getting when she was 14 and 15 years old. And this is a unique thing, Kelsey, because for people who don't know out there, the typical recruiting class is a offers are being done in the fall of a player's junior year. So softball being a spring sport means that many of these athletes have just finished up their sophomore year. If they have a really good team, they may not even played varsity yet, and yet they're getting Division I scholarships. They're getting offers in to programming even before they've started the quote unquote varsity season. And so it's a very interesting dynamic. And so I can imagine um, probably not easy to make a great decision at 14 years old as a freshman about what school. And that's not saying no, it
No.
wasn't a great decision. It's just the saying like that's a tough decision for any kid at 17, 18, let alone 14. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Your mind is changing all the time, especially at that age. So my list of what I wanted, it's funny to look back at because it completely changed so fast over the course of even a few months. And so I think I like the rules that are in place now because it definitely was stressful during my time for girls to be committing eighth grade, freshman, sophomore year, because by the time you were a sophomore, you were considered quote late. And that was just kind of the environment. That doesn't mean you're late. That doesn't mean that's the case for athletes if they're not committed. I ended up committing to NC State my senior year, which obviously I'll talk about. But yeah, definitely a stressful time as at that age.
All right, you head to the Wolfpack in chance of, great opportunity, good school, great area, and you're having a good, steady career going on at NC State. You get pretty deep into your softball career and your school career, and then the unlikeliest of things happens, right? A massive concussion in practice, leaving you with a pretty serious TBI, or what they call traumatic brain injury. We see these things from car accidents. A good friend of mine who wrote Left for Dead was hit with a car, and coming when he was in college, walking home from the bar at 1 in the morning, hit by a car in a crosswalk, went right through, hit and run, and that he's going back, learning everything again because of this
Wow.
TBI. And amazing story. And now you're at higher learning. You got all these questions, right? First of all, walk us through what happened that day.
Yeah. So it was a fall practice. We were running bases. So half of the team was in the field, half of us were running bases. I'm on first base, and our coach hits it to the pitcher. So our shortstop was like 6 foot, super athletic. She's coming through to turn a double play, but instead of making a lane on either side of the base path, she came straight through. So as I was sliding into second base, she just came straight knee first, full momentum right into my face.
So
Um,
knee to the face.
Knee to the
So not
face.
only you take the knee to the head, but then I'm sure your head goes back to the ground. Fall ball is usually harder ground. It's getting cold now, and so
I
you're
appreciate
also
you saying that because that is true. Yes, it was.
it's a factor. Like, it's a factor. And so, man, so you're taking from both sides. And what you think is, what is the coach think knows the severity right away, or is she just thinking, like, she needs to sit out the rest of the day, she got her bell rung and she's gonna be okay?
I'm gonna be honest. So I talk about this on some podcasts, sometimes not. So I was dealing with a whole nother thing with my coaches at the time.
Yep.
We had a lot of tough situations going on with our athletic team. Kind of
Yep.
just to even give short context, we had almost half our team leave, transfer, quit based on the behaviors of our coaches. So kind of at the time, if you don't mind, I'll just kind of walk you through a little bit. But
Sure.
essentially that fall, we had a lot of players. And at this point, I'm so close with them, right? They're my sisters. We eat together. We travel together. I've known them for 3 years. They start expressing really severe mental health concerns based on the coach's behavior.
Yeah.
So I consult with our sports psychologist and our athletic trainer, and all of us decide it's good to go to administration and just ask for some intervention. I don't want to give secondhand information, so I want them to meet with our players.
Sure.
My coaches found out that had happened, and they had kind of treated a lot of players poorly already, but definitely got a lot worse for me personally. Thought I was trying to get them fired. There was some miscommunication. So about 2 weeks before my injury, I went into my coach's office and I said, listen, let's talk this out. I'll be direct with you. These are the mental health concerns. I'm not trying to get you fired. I just want to talk about this, and the environment needs to change.
Yeah.
But if I need to transfer, if this isn't going to work out, because before then, like, we had a great relationship, like, and not in an arrogant way, but I have podcasts. My coaches are like, Kelsey is here early and late. Like, she's what our program represents. So it was very 50-50 to go from this great relationship to this stark difference where they're just kind of berating me. And so
And
I
do you
end up,
feel like at this point, like you're playing a little bit of a mediator, right? Where the
absolutely.
coach, you've got a good relationship with the coach, you're acting kind of in a captain's role. Some of the players, my sisters are unhappy. There's some things that have gone down that they're not kosher with, and we need to just bring it all into the light. Let's have that conversation and talk about it. And you're thinking as a captain or captain-esque, you're facilitating those discussions.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was that kind of person on my team, and I felt really grateful that my teammates could come to me with that. And I was seeing it from a different lens than I think some people, because so many of us were having private conversations. So
Mm.
I meet with my coaches, and they say, Kelsey, if your numbers are up, you're starting. Why are you making this harder for yourself? Stop projecting, like, leave it alone. So then 2 weeks go by, we're at practice. And so half of us are running, half of the team's in the field. They sub out every person except for me. So I'm running still. So I run for about an hour, and then I get hit. And then my coach just claps and says, "Good job, shortstop. Let's move on." So I had to deal with this injury virtually alone. So I'm stumbling off the field. The world is spinning. My head's pounding. My career is very likely instantly over. Next morning, my coaches handled it really terribly. I'll just say that. And so
Yeah.
my coaches saw the severity right away, but they definitely played on it in a way that was just cruel, knowing that I had actually had multiple concussions before. So I'd had more than one. I had a few in high school. So I'd been through that recovery process, the just physical symptoms for the most part, migraines. I had nerve damage in my neck from some head injury. So they knew all of that history. But I had also had, concussion protocols before where I knew it wasn't a concussion. I came back in my 5 days and I was back on the field. So for this one to be so serious, they'd kind of seen the difference in me. I'd never really let an injury hold me back that long, but it just was not handled very well. So they saw the severity, but yeah, it was kind of left for me to deal with on my own. And so kind of over those next 6 weeks, I would say, I asked for some time off just to really figure out what I was doing. I was seeing 6 doctors. It was a head, neck, jaw injury all at once. I had braces put back on for the second time, screws, springs to fix my jaw. I had nerve
Mm.
damage in my neck. And then I was just suffering from migraines, pain every day. And then what made this injury so different was that I was starting to experience cognitive symptoms, which was the scariest part, and one that I hadn't experienced with my injuries before. So struggling
Like
to
memory
articulate.
loss, speech impediment, those kind of
Mhm.
things.
Yeah, those kinds of things. Yeah. So
Yep.
just forgetfulness, confusion, just enhanced mood swings. So I didn't even recognize my personality. And that's when it kind of got real to
Mm.
say, if I can't go out on this field and risk my brain damage and not even be the same person and sister and daughter if I can't get over this. And even if I do I really want to risk that again? But I mean, at the time, obviously I just wanted to get back out on the field. I'm kind of in denial. So that ended up being the decision, knowing how serious it was and how much I didn't want to lose that quality of life. But it was tough. It was a tough 6 weeks for sure.
So that was it. After that day, you never played softball again.
Nope. That was my last day. Last day on the
Okay.
dirt.
So how does that, you go through this event, traumatic, a lot of recovery, a lot of PT, tons of physicians. I mean, it's a team of them with 6, right? And and now let's fast forward to you make this recovery, you graduate, and how does this turn of events happen where it's like, let's have Kelsey O'Connor do our commencement speech, like as the
Yeah.
student representative. Tell us how that, like how they decide that.
Yeah, so I actually ended up applying. NC State does an application process. By that time, it had been about a year and a half, almost 2 years since my injury, I want to say. And I was just really grateful. I was blessed. I'd gotten better with my speech and clarity. By the grace of God, I just healed really well. And so by that time, I got an email that was open for applications, and I decided to go for it. I'd never given a speech publicly before. I don't know what kind of came over me, but I just really wanted to go for it. And then I got a call that I was selected, that they selected me to speak at the
That's cool.
ceremony.
That's cool. So today you're working, you're in grad school, you're doing grad school for social work,
Yes.
you're interning with Athlete Talk, doing some work on mental health for athletes, which is fabulous. Um, Now, one thing most people may not know about you is you're a bit of a collector. You collect some snow globes, you collect, mugs, you collect, keychains, paintings.
That is
I
true.
I appreciate this because, when I started speaking publicly, I remember thinking, like, you know what I'm gonna do? What was cool when I didn't do it initially, but I probably started drinking coffee at like 38, 40 years old. Like it was way beyond like
Interesting.
normal people. Yeah, I like didn't really drink coffee when I was in sports at all. And so we were so cognizant of like what we were putting in our body, right? And I was like, man, too much caffeine is gonna be bad, right? And
Sure.
so I would be very conscious of it. And I didn't like the flavor of black coffee. Of course, I would then after I got done with sports, I was like having meetings all the time in Starbucks. And I'm like, man, it smells great in here. But I don't drink any of it. And so eventually people were like, hey, do you want a coffee? And I'm like, well, I'll have whatever you have. And I'm caramel macchiatos and I'm
Oh,
learning
yeah.
ordering, how to order at a Starbucks. And I was like, so I thought like, man, as I would go around the world and have these conversations, we'd often like I'd go with the meeting organizer to a Starbucks or something before, like the day before, the night before, we're going to dinner or whatever. You stop by Starbucks and you'd see like the coffee mug, like Starbucks, LA, Starbucks, San Diego,
Yes, the
Starbucks,
travel collection.
yeah. And I was like, man, I should start getting all the mugs from every city I'm in. And thank God I stopped doing that collection. I would own like 700 mugs, right? Like, I mean, it'd be crazy how many cities I've actually been in. And plus, they started breaking because, you put them in your luggage and the luggage gets
Oh,
thrown away and
yeah.
stuff. And it's pretty hard to keep it. And I'm a terrible packer, so I make no room for a mug.
Well, in
So
17 countries, I would imagine that would be hard to
it would be
travel.
cool to have the Starbucks though in different languages. I never thought about that, but that would be pretty cool. So
That's
I,
awesome.
I I appreciate and I guess you're gonna have to hone in on one of these collections. I think you're just gonna have to like
I'm gonna have to
decide to
decide, yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
can
You
never
may
pick
have to
one, that's why I've got 4 different collections and I changed my mind, so I'll have to
yeah,
pick a smaller one.
I'm thinking the KOC fan club ought to decide. You ought to like lay out your best, each one and say, hey, which one should we go forward with? Because
I can get behind
being a
that.
Chicago girl, I think we probably appreciate the snow globe more than the southern people who like, what's a snow globe, right? Like
That's
they
true.
don't. Yeah, I've heard about it, but I don't really understand what a snow globe is. Why would you? Haven't you seen enough snow as Midwestern kids? Um, we probably have, but all right. So the day comes out. You get the notice and you're going to be a commencement speech address. I mean, it's about a 5-minute talk, right?
Mhm.
Um and so you get the signal on this, you're on the big stage, you're in front of the graduation, the stadium. I mean, there's got to be like 20,000 plus people, right? I
It
mean,
was
this
about
is NC State.
20,000. That's what they
Yeah.
said, yeah.
So, I mean, you've never given a public speech and this is your first one. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
what is going? I mean, are you feeling your heart through your chest at that point? Just like thump,
Oh,
thump, thump,
absolutely.
thump. Like, because you look as cool as a cucumber. You're coming up. Yeah, my twin sang at his commencement and I one upped him, and it was a great opener joke.
Thank you.
And, yeah, and like you're looking super cool. Like you look like you'd been a hero for years on the stage.
Wow, I so appreciate that because yeah, I was a nervous mess for a week.
Yeah,
Even the days leading up to it, my brother, my twin brother, him and I are super close, so he loved the joke. He loved it.
yeah,
He was giving me some tips for my voice. So there was this big breakfast in the morning and I refused to eat. I'm just studying
yeah,
my notes.
yeah,
And I get up there, and if you actually watch the video closely, you'll see me say good morning and then pause because I blanked. I was already like, "Oh my gosh, how's this gonna go? I don't even remember how I'm
yeah.
gonna
What do I
start."
say next?
Yeah. So it's
I've
crazy
had
that you
those
can
moments.
tell.
I have
Yeah.
totally had those moments, and I so appreciate that. Like I can't imagine the courage that on a first outing, like listen, I don't know if I had the courage on my first outing to like give my talk to the dog. I was like, she's gonna hate it. Like I was like, I don't know who I could. Like I was like practicing in front of nobody, recording it, listening to myself, going, "Oh my gosh, I hate my voice." All the things that you go through,
That
right?
you run through, absolutely.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It was
And
a mix, yeah.
I think that you just killed it. I mean, I
Thank
just thought
you.
it's great. Why, if you had to pinpoint, you have a great message in the commencement speech, right?
Thank
Um,
you.
let's talk a little bit about that message. if you had to pinpoint why did this become this viral 5-minute clip? It's actually 7, and they spend way too much on the chancellor. But like, I don't know what YouTube. I don't know who cut this thing up. It had to be someone
It's
from NC
NC
State.
State.
Make sure the chancellor gets in there. You know, but why? Why was it so important? Why was it so impactful to others?
I just think that so many people resonate with something that they feel defined by. So for me, it was as a student and an athlete, but when I was getting messages from people all over the world who had seen it, it was maybe their job as a teacher or a doctor or a first responder. For some people, it was a relationship role that they had identified with as a parent or a partner or a spouse or even just a medical diagnosis. And so I think I didn't realize how, even though the stories were different and maybe the labels were different, I think people just, we get so caught up sometimes in just our busyness. And that's so natural and normal. But I think that it went viral just because, not because I have this innate wisdom that nobody knows, but just because people, we all forget to slow down for a minute sometimes and really appreciate our qualities and those internal qualities we have that make us good at what we do or allow us to get there, and those things that can't be taken away from us. So I think just that had brought me so much joy to really see myself that way and see others that way. And I just almost wanted to take 5 minutes for everyone in the room to not be impressed by me, but be impressed by themselves and just the qualities that they possess. And I think that's why it really resonated, because we all have something we're busy with. We all have something that kind of defines us on first impression, but really getting into that inner stuff, I think people are really craving that authenticity and connection.
Yeah, I think that that's yeah, I think it's one of the things. So folks, you got to go watch it now. Like, we'll have, again, the link is below. So you should go see it. It's a well deserved and well spent 5 minutes, 7 minutes of your life. And if you were to say, I know you're speaking to the grads, but it wasn't all grads that are weighing into you now on the viral. This is for everybody. Tell the audience what you really wanted them to leave with. What did you really want them to leave with and understand of your message?
Yeah. So honestly, I love talking about the process of it because as I was writing it, every single word that I wrote was very intentional. And I knew that half the audience was going to be graduates, but it was also going to be supporters and educators. And so my speech was written to everybody in the room, not just graduates. So I think having that intention in mind and wanting to include a whole room, I think that came across even in video, but I really wanted to give people something to take away. So not just the message, but for me, that was changing actively how I describe people. And so in the speech, I talk about describing people by their attitudes, how they treat others, and then their unique intrinsic strengths, just what makes them a unique, special person. And so I really just want people to walk away with action steps and something that's really tangible to stop and reframe for a moment and say, okay, how am I describing someone when they're not in a room? Am I describing someone I love by their energy and their heart first? So just walking away with that practice, I think, is really helpful and applicable to anybody.
Yeah, awesome. Let's talk about two things that you and I really share. A passion, a love for. One is for sure, um, the athletes transitioning. As I
Yes.
stepped into these things I've dedicated my whole life to, I'm going to transition that dedication to my career, my relationships. And one of the powers that we have as athletes, especially Division I athletes, and for those who don't know, only 7% of all the high school athletes get a chance to become a college athlete, and that becomes even rare air when you talk about Division I athletes. So it's Kelsey and I are in this category that's a little bit unique, and but then it ends. At some point, it ends. Like, it stops,
Mm-hmm.
and we have all these skills we've developed, which I talk about in leading winning teams, like this hyper learning, team environment, time management, physical, mental, emotional, moral conditioning. We get all of it. Having a coach as a side and being able to take feedback in and being then be able to execute on that feedback. People take advantage of, like, oh, anyone can do this. Oh, no, they can't. Like, this isn't
Mm-hmm.
standard practice for most people to have all those skills. Some of those skills for sure, but all those skills are almost a prerequisite for success as a high level athlete. Because if you don't have one of them, it's gap in your game and they'll exploit it in a hurry, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about your deep heart, passion, desire for helping athletes go from this to now something new over here and what that means to you.
It means a lot to me, honestly, especially because I think my career didn't end up the way that I was expecting. Obviously, I didn't win the championships or break the records or whatever, you set out to do when you go into a place in a program. But really learning to appreciate some of those skills and apply it towards something that was still meaningful. I didn't know it would be motivational speaking, but it's a blessing that it is. And so using that story. So for athletes to know, regardless of that outcome, whether they ended up winning or winning a World Series or whatever, or maybe it didn't end how they planned, those skills are something that nobody can take away from them. And that's a strength and that's a power. So just having and opening up the space for athletes to recognize that, talk about it, see it, and apply it towards something else meaningful in their life. I had
Yeah,
great people in my life to help me, and I just want to be that person for somebody else.
oh, that's great. Like, yeah, so you had a support system, which is crucial. Pretty
Mhm.
big deal. I know most people who come through athletics, when it ends, and this is another hard thing. Like, it may end on time if you're a college athlete, it's going to end, you're going to graduate, you actually lose eligibility at that point. There's
I was
a
gonna say
bunch
your
of other things
eligibility
yeah,
expires.
like there is an eligibility expiration on that. And so, but for us in the pro game, like, listen, 99.9% of everybody else gets fired. We all get fired. And there's like this 0.1% who goes, I'm going to go out the way I want to go out. Like,
I
they'll get
never
to
thought about that.
retire
That's true.
and do the retirement, tour and all that stuff. Like, literally, it's 0.1%. Like, it's very low. This isn't the
Yeah.
standard operating procedure for athletes. We are all fired. And so, that's very different. Most people haven't even been fired in their career. They're like, oh, I went to this job and I did it for a while and it wasn't great. I didn't enjoy it so much. So I thought I'd be better off doing this over here. And so I started putting my resume out there and I quit my job and got another opportunity over here and another offer. Like, they weren't fired, they quit, right? Like, and then of course, all of us, at some point, you might get fired from a job. That happens. And you find out, hey, maybe
Mhm.
I'm not meant to be doing this. But when you put your whole life and your whole world into this and your craft and your expertise, and then someone goes, yeah, you're fired. You're like,
Yeah.
wait, what? Like, if I got fired from Burger King, I wouldn't be so upset. Like, I'm not that good at flipping burgers, like, or making fries. I get it. Like, it's not really what I'm doing the rest of my life. So I'm sort of okay with it. Like, I don't feel good that I've been fired, but this isn't what I've dedicated my whole life to and feel like I'm an expert at this. And I've got a few accolades that would say, hey, I'm pretty good at it, right? And then they're like, yeah, we don't need
Yeah.
you anymore. You're like, damn.
Yeah, when you've spent a majority percentage of your life even, and even if you
Yeah,
know that it's not gonna be the
yeah,
rest of your life,
yeah,
sometimes, when the goal's right in front of you, you're just going to hit that goal and then you'll figure out what happens after. So then once
yeah.
you actually do, and then the game keeps going on without you, that kinda hurts too. Because you're
Oh,
like, "Okay, the game keeps going, new players, new coaches, whatever,
yeah.
and it keeps rolling and I'm I'm not here anymore,"
Like,
you know?
forgotten. Like
Yeah, that's the
forgotten in
hardest
months,
part, I
man. Like,
think. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's one thing that people don't talk about, the psychology of athletes. Like, I did a talk one time in Canton, Ohio, the Hall of Fame, NFL Hall of Fame town, and a famous coach named Don Shula, who coached for
My
years in the
dad worked for
NFL.
Don Shula.
That's so cool.
Oh my
So, I mean,
gosh.
that's amazing, right? So Don Shula is like he's like a legend. This guy's a
Oh,
legend, and he
yeah,
went
I hear
to
about
high
him all the
school.
time.
Yeah, he went to high school in Canton, right? And I am speaking at his high school, and I'm like, this is like 2 years removed from his career. I'm with the Cleveland Indians at the time, and I'm like, legends who have carved their way into the world like Don Shula, and the high school kids are like, who's Don Shula? Like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, know your
Oh
audience,
my
Trent. Like,
goodness.
he was the NFL Coach of the Year 3 years ago, and he retired 2 years ago. I mean, like, hello,
Yeah.
like, and it
Oh,
was
that's
just like,
crazy.
yeah, I know they didn't know, and I was just like, man, that's how fast it changes. Like, what have you done for me lately? And I was like, man, this is the world of professional sports that people always don't recognize, that at the highest level, there's a dark side of it too. And I put Division I athletics at that side too. I put it in there, and I don't discount it that there are some rough edges on the mental side of the things, and on our health, and I've had a lot of conversations recently. Speaking of your coaches, that a lot of coaches have become distracted. And I don't. I'm not trying to protect them. I'm not trying to, defend, but I am giving grace in the fact that coaches are on the block for contracts and everybody wants their job and they're worried about it and the money's pretty good now. And, if you lose your job, where are you going to go? And you've got to move towns and you got to move your house. And, people get focused on it's not going great and me and I and my concern, and they're losing that. I'm here to develop these kids into young adults and grow them into that next level. And if I can do that the best, everything should take care of itself. But it's very easy to be like, are they going to renew my contract? Like, I
I
don't.
will say, yeah. I mean, so I enjoy talking about the coaching aspect because I have so much respect and empathy for what that must feel like to have those wins be your career. And I think that's the thing that I talk about a lot. So, and not to, overharp on my coaches, but I think it's a really good example because I do have such empathy for coaches. And my coaches were actually married. So it was like double the stress for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's okay for coaches to say, like, it's a team first. You might feel like family, and that's okay to see your family, but it's a business first. But I think putting that out there versus my coaches were very much like, you're our daughters and we love you. And then just the treatment was very opposite. And
Yeah.
I think
Not
just setting that
consistent with that message.
expectation
Yeah.
is important. And I think also mental health resources for coaches, like we should be having groups, we should be having
Yeah.
resources specifically for coaches. That way that stress can be let out in a positive, healthy way. I think we focus so heavily on athletes, but there's definitely those coaches impact those athletes on a daily basis. Their language and their actions have a huge impression on athletes, not just in their career, but I think that's why it is important to kind of talk about those resources for coaches too, and even just groups for coaches to talk with each other. Because, yeah, I absolutely empathize with the stress of the wins and the performance being tied to your livelihood and your family and where you are in life, for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about when it ends. When I
Hmm.
mean yours ended abruptly. Like this isn't planned. I've got 2 more years. I got 2 seasons. I've got time. This is an abrupt end. And we talked about uh, you know offline. You and I have talked about this in the past about that moment you decide to move forward, and it's very easy to be, hey, I'm the TBI person. This happened to me, and I'm the coach who got fired, in the middle of a long term contract, and you know, how could I just get fired after 3 World Series? Like you
Hmm.
can attach a story to all of it. And I know I did this when I first was not renewed on a contract by the Cleveland Indians. Two of the last 3 series years we were in the World Series, and they didn't pick up my option year. And I
Wow.
was like, oh my gosh. And I immediately was like, who am I now? I'm not the baseball guy. I'm not the guy who helps people reach their dreams. What am I doing? I had an identity crisis and I was stuck. I was stuck and probably leaking a little depression. Didn't really know what it was then. And I had to move forward, but it took a hot minute to find that moment to move forward. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, can I ask you a question? I
I don't,
guess
I'm the
like
interviewee.
I know. It's, like, not allowed. Well, then I guess I'll share what my experience you can kinda tell me if you
Okay, you
relate
share your
then,
experience.
but
They want to hear from you. They don't want to hear from me, Kelsey.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that's very fair. I think it's important to honor what you've lost and feel through those feelings and acknowledge them because 'cause they're gonna come up one way or another, but there definitely reached a point where, people were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you," and that was really I appreciated that, but I definitely was getting sucked deeper into I didn't wanna feel like everyone was sorry for me, like, I really wanted to turn it into something better, and I didn't wanna feel embarrassed. I didn't want the TBI to now define me. First, it was an athlete, and now it's that I've had head injuries. I get hit in the head a lot, like, Kelsey's injury prone, and I didn't want that. I wanted something else. And so I think it's important to honor those emotions and not just go straight into the meaning right away, because you can't figure out the meaning unless you really sit with the rock bottom. But it's so interesting because I was just talking to I was talking to students at Oklahoma yesterday online, and a student asked me, when did you feel like you didn't want to be sad anymore? And there's definitely a moment, but I also think a series of moments where I was in my room crying, heads pounding, room's a mess. I was just a walking warning sign. I slept all day. I was a mess. I didn't eat very much, just all of those things. And then just kind of deciding, like, I want to make this meaningful. How do I turn this and dedicate it to something else? And if I do want to be a good person for other people, I got to take care of myself too. And so it's just kind of a decision in the moment of rock bottom, but also a series of decisions. Like, how do I envision a happier, healthier version of myself? And if I don't know how it's going to work out anyways, I might as well believe that that's possible. And then how do I decide today to get a little bit closer to that version of myself?
When this happened in the moment, were you
Hmm.
surprised by that question? Like, that's a pretty deep question from
Yeah.
a student. Like, did that give you pause for reflection of like, man, I was sad for a long time and I was in the pit of despair and digging a deeper hole with myself because I'm starting to believe that I'm the TBI person. I'm the person who's got it so bad. And the oh, I'm so sorry for you reminds me you should feel sorry for me. I've got it bad. Like and we're playing into that even if it's not outwardly a little bit mentally. Is that fair?
I wouldn't say that I play into it. I actually think
Okay.
that it struck me because I normally disassociate so much. I live such a blessed life. Like, I feel
Yeah.
so grateful every day. I'm healthy. I healed enough to be able to talk about this, and it's really humbling and special when I talk to nonprofits and other people who have suffered from head injuries, and they're recovering from vocal injuries or whatever that looks like for them. And so I feel like I'm so disassociated with that part of my life that when someone asks me about how I was sad, I don't really talk about the emotions that much because I don't
Mm,
go there. I don't associate with it. So, but I think it really struck me because this is a student who is going through something similar,
yeah.
and how do I put myself back there to give her a little bit of hope so I'm not always up here on the positive and now I'm unable to relate to her, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it did happen. You did happen,
Yeah.
but you've chosen to what we always go back on in the depths of pain, right? Is you go back and review it, you don't relive it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, I think
being able
so.
to go back and give a quick review of some things I was thinking at that time, but like not driving to the depths of, oh, let me go relive how lousy I felt in that morning, confused, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't want to go back there. Like, that was a whole different time for me, and the time's over now. And so I don't go there because I've got all this time forward. I've got today, the present, and I've got all the time forward. That's really important for me. How do you feel about that?
I like that. I'll say I definitely think I live there most of the time. Like 99% of the time, it's today and forward. And how do I just move forward and be a positive impact and positively contribute to the world? But I also will say that when I disassociate from that vulnerability too much, I sometimes allow myself to go back there. Like, I'll set a timer for 5 minutes and I'll listen to a song that reminds me. Or I kept a video journal for 5 years in college, and so I can actually go back and like watch videos of how my life was going. I updated myself, like what I was doing. And that way, when I'm talking to a college student, I'm like, oh, I'm talking to her because that's not me anymore. And I'm not sad. But how do I go back just enough to really connect with someone who's in that space right now? But I think more so what you're saying is I don't go back there every day. I don't feel like I'm still struggling. I don't feel like a victim at all. I feel really grateful. So for the most part, it's, yeah, I guess I would say reviewing and moving forward more than I relive for sure.
I had to shift locations here on my chat here as I where I was at. So this is so cool. I love. I never even thought about the video journal idea, and that's very cool. Um, and it's a great reminder of something that feels like so way back then. And like you said, you've almost disassociated from that in your life in a way. But clearly, in remembrance, you know what happened. And now you're doing this, and we both have just loved these times with college students. One of the things with college students is I do feel like there's a real opportunity to help, help people move ahead quicker. I don't feel like people give these young adults like great information. They don't give them um, targeted instruction, targeted um, things that are moving their lives forward. It's like they're glossing over stuff. And every time I talk with college students, it's a buzz with the potential, but not a lot of focus. What have you found?
I think that's interesting because I feel like I agree with you in a mix because I definitely would say that some people in college really need that direction. Like I was lucky because I don't want to discount that I had some really great mentorship and people
Yeah.
that guided me and gave me exactly what you're talking about. However, I definitely see in the college space where there is that miss. And it's interesting, yeah, going to talking to college students. I'm not that much removed. So I feel like I'm still able to relate, but I'm also a little bit removed. And every college I've spoken to in the beginning, I'm like, I don't know if they want to listen to me. Maybe they feel like I'm a know it all. And then afterwards, the questions and the engagement is like off the charts. Like they want to come talk and they ask and they have these like relatable stories. So yeah, I think I definitely think just that guidance is definitely helpful, especially at that age. It's such a growth age from 18 to 22. If that's when you're in college, maybe you go back later, but um yeah, definitely a really pivotal time to be able to talk to them and just have honest conversations.
One of the things that I've had a lot of conversations about with, and I want to hear your impression of this because college changes over years and what we're studying and how it looks and the skill sets that students come in with, and a lot of it's based on technology and based on signs of the times and all those things. Um, One of the things I've had a lot of conversations with, especially juniors and seniors that are now headed into the workforce, is using the athletic motif of um, the first round draft choice, right? Like companies are going out and they're looking for students to come in and deliver this contribution. Like, hey, you're a student, you're a really good student from NC State. It's a good school. You're going to come in here and deliver something for us in a contribution. And we had 100 applicants. We interviewed 10 people, and then we brought in four of them, and then we brought two back, and then Kelsey, we finally chose you. And I don't know if kids understand that process. Like this is a draft, and they're choosing you over other people. Now, sometimes it's serendipitous, like, oh well, actually we chose Kelsey, but she already took another job. So Trent, you're number two. Like, and so I mean, but I'm still final two of the 100. So it's like you've already gone through a lot of iterations of eliminating other people that they don't think can contribute better than you can contribute. And then I think there's a disconnect that, like, when they get to their career, they're like, wow, they have a lot of expectations for me. Like, yeah, you were the best out of the 100. Like, we have big things for you, and we expect you really to deliver on this. And I don't know if kids are ready for that, knowing the value that they're supposed to bring.
I think it really depends. And I will say I think obviously we all have our perceptions from like who we're around, our environment, and I'll say like a lot of my environment is full of students that I mean my peers, my friends, whatever, they are really ready to achieve and overachieve. And so I think it both could be true because I think there's a little bit of a overgeneralization of college students sometimes because they are working jobs and running clubs and you have to be the best even to get somewhere within your school nowadays, like probably back then too, but um you do have to be a high performer. So I think it just depends on the individual person for sure. I think that people that have been involved in things and have been high achievers, whether it's in a club or a musical theater or a sport, know what it's like to get rejected. And so they do know what it's like to be chosen and have to deliver. But there also is that subset of people that maybe haven't been through that process, so they're not ready to perform. So I think I think it's obviously just an individual thing, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a college student population thing that's happening, because I see the people around me. I see that dialogue, but I also see the people around me that are my peers working extremely hard to make an impact, make a good impression, do everything they can when they first get to a job. But that's just my experience and the people that I've seen.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good. I think that response. I think some of the things that you're doing, interning into real world, into different roles in companies, I think that has a huge impact on seeing, hey, what are the expectations for these folks? Not just for me as an intern, but on my fellow colleagues who are full-time employees here, what their expectation is for them. How does everyone carry themselves? Who should I be modeling myself after that's really moving forward inside the organization? I think that real world experience sometimes is such an eye opener. And I hope like kids take advantage of that when they're in school to get that time in. And you know, with athletics, that's hard because there's not a lot of free time in your schedule to be like, oh, hey, I'm going to go for a semester and go work on Wall Street because I want to be a trader. And I'm going to learn a little bit about how Lehman Brothers, you know, does things. And like, you can't do that. You have fall practice. You can't go that whole time. So, you know, some of that I think is part of the challenge of being athletes at school.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that definitely gets missed sometimes, because I was really lucky. Like, I was in high school, I was encouraged to do a bunch of things, spin a lot of plates. And so I feel like I was had a unique situation. When I got to school, I got hired for a research job 2 weeks in. And so I had a mentor. I was getting published. I was doing research. I was volunteering because my major was social work. So I was going to practice and then going to a shelter to help every, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever. And so I was getting that dynamic experience, but I know it's different with different sports. I know it's different with different coaching staffs, whatever that might be. So, but implementing, even if it's just volunteering 3 hours a week, like having those other outlets to foster your identity or even your professionalism or your service is super important. And that gets lost because I think it makes you a better performer too. Like, I think being well-rounded as a person made me just more confident in my skin, more grateful, whatever, else that comes with that. But, and honestly too, I love what you're saying about, that guidance, because we even talked about it in our NIL for You podcast episode, just about networking. And I think I was really lucky to have a mentor from being hired for a job right into college. But I also sought out a mentor because that's what I was taught to do growing up. And so I think it's just really helpful advice to go seek out a mentor, be with somebody that you were there where you want to be. Go seek that person out, offer to help them, not just for them to help you right away, and go build a relationship, because I think networking is kind of the strongest aspect of where I am and where I think people in my life that have been successful are. And I think that networking piece is missing a little bit with our connection in colleges these days.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. I think it is big. And we have a mutual friend, an alumni direct, trying to bridge that gap of athletes and people into their alumni and getting involved with boosters while you're there doing it, so that as you transition into career, just having people already in the industry or somewhere where that can be of value. Let's finish with this, Kelsey. You know, you've gone through some of these trials. I mean, most of your life is full of successes and wins, and you've been a winner forever. Elite player, all these things. You have a significant setback that creates opportunity for you in a lot of ways. But people are going through challenges, and if you were talking to someone who is right in the middle of a challenge right now, what would you say is the most important thing for them to consider first and foremost, and as they move through it and forward out of it?
I would say that your inner voice is going to be the loudest and the one that you have to listen to for the rest of your life. So, having grace with yourself through your challenges, honoring the tough part of it, and then choosing to see that so you can fully celebrate the other side of it and overcoming it, and just celebrating each small step of progress, whether that's daily, weekly, monthly, of how you're going to move forward. So just kind of being nice to yourself and having a good inner voice, I would say, is the biggest thing that I would tell someone going through a challenge, is just be nice to yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. Help yourself move forward. What would you say to a friend? What would you say to a teammate? And now be that person for yourself.
That's so powerful. I know that in leading winning teams, I interviewed Ann Gaffigan on this show years ago. Actually years ago now, and Ann was a Division I athlete in Nebraska, and she was a steeplechaser, and she set the U.S. record in the steeplechase, and then qualified for the U.S. Olympic team, and then they didn't include steeplechase in the Olympics the year she was on the team, so she never actually got to compete in the Olympics. And she talked about her senior year, where she had three kind of lackluster seasons and kind of gave it over and decided that, she has to speak better to herself. And she really impacted me when she said, speak to yourself like you would your good friend. And I was like, man, I don't do that. Right. Like I'm
Mm,
tough on myself. And sometimes I'm harsh.
yeah.
And I'm like, man, I would as a coach, like I would never be harsh with a player like that. Yet I'm okay to do it with me. Like that makes zero
Yeah.
sense, right? And that really helped me. I mean, and I was probably 52 when I heard that, right? And I'm thinking like, man, I wish I would have heard that 40 years ago, right? Like, like, but that's the truth of the matter, man. We got to live with us, and our voice is a big part of what we're telling ourselves. And so I love that advice. It's really strong. Um, for everyone out there, Kelsey O'Connor, KOC. Kelsey, tell them where they can find you.
You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, on socials, Kelsey O'Connor 6. And I'm also starting a podcast pretty soon. So you'll be able to find that on Spotify, Life Beyond Labels. But follow
Life
me
beyond
anywhere.
legacy.
Yes, on social and my website, kelseyo'connor.net.
That's cool. So if you're looking for inspiration in your organization, you're looking for a motivational speaker, a young lady who talks obviously a lot deeper than most young ladies, who's lived what it feels like a lot more years than 23 or whatever it is. Um,
23.
yeah. So your years, you speak with years of wisdom beyond your chronological years. So for
Thank
everyone
you.
out there, do follow, check out Kelsey, find her, kelseyo'connor.net, and you will not be disappointed. For everyone else, thank you for joining us on the Winners Find a Way show. We are here every Thursday now, live at 10 a.m. and 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern. And you can find us on LinkedIn Live, YouTube, on the Leadershipity channel, and Facebook Live on my pages. And of course, our podcasts are everywhere in the world. For everyone else, we can't wait to see you next time on Winners Find a Way. See you then.